Hey guys, so it's bat reporting time. uh, 7 chapters away from the end of this year-long story, I think makes these kind of mediocre issues, as this one was, particularly shocking. Not just mediocre in execution, so maybe the word mediocre is wrong, but lacking in focus and lacking in it's hard to believe that most of the material we're getting here is really leading towards the end so much as just biding time and waiting for the real stuff to happen. So separate from kind of the issue of having been a reader of this all along, this is an okay issue. Last issue, which was also written by Ray Fox, and this issue is written by Ray Fox, was sharper and more fun to read. This issue, you almost could feel him struggling to just put stuff in that he wanted to put in and not having thought up a good way to act it out on stage, so to speak. It's not true for all of it. The opening scene was pretty good. With these ghosts conjured by Mr. Begone. Somehow that's hard to say. Mr. Begone, Mr. Bygone, I keep wanting to say. Mr. Begone was kind of a cool scene and pretty well drawn by this artist, Javi Fernandez, who is kind of an inconsistent artist in this issue. But I thought it was a pretty cool opening, although even there it raised some questions in my mind. But then after that, there was a bunch of stuff with Batwing and ghosts, and then Jim Corrigan coming to meet him, and then they all meet up together with Batman to go to some cemetery to interrogate Dr. Todd, who apparently found a mysterious book and thus decided to do all the supernatural stuff that happened at Arkham Asylum. That's what inspired him. It still seems odd that he's the one behind all that stuff at Arkham Asylum. I thought it was other people, Maxie Zeus and the guy who was coming back from hell, Reverend Blackfire. But anyway, yeah, and that they can't, if this guy Todd is behind what happened there, and something's behind him, that they can't get any better information out of him. It's convenient. And kind of just wasting our time. I think there was some useful character beats in the scene between Bluebird and Spoiler. I think and it kind of pointed to some of the really good potential interesting character points about Spoiler with parental issues, and I really like that Spoiler thinks the Bat family are the bad guys. I never read any Spoiler in the pre-New 52, so I don't know what she was like back then, if this has any connection to that, if they drew from that, or Ray Fox and company have made that up themselves. But even in this scene, as has been really sprinkled throughout the Batman Eternal story, the epic that we've got, there's always been lots of little details that seem to be fudged. And yes, that happens in comic books a lot, but it just seems even more so here. And so even in this scene, I had trouble buying into, she sets up this stun gun in front of Stephanie Brown and says, if you move an inch, it'll shoot you. But she could keep her patootie and body exactly where it is, and the tripod, the tiny, thin little tripod holding it up, is very easy, even by someone who's not a superhero, to just kick it over, and then the stun gun's not pointed at her. Unless everybody knows that stun guns fill an entire room with electricity and stun them. So, that's being really picky, but that's the kind of thing that just constantly sort of sends a signal that people aren't trying too hard the writers aren't trying too hard in a lot of these Batman Eternal things. Now, I'm saying all of this, I'm picking away at this poor comic book, even though I enjoyed it. I didn't enjoy it as much as the last two issues, but I had a fun time reading it. And I think it's so much as context, and, you know, we're getting this stuff with Lucius Fox, or not Lucius, but his son, Batwing, and Jim Corrigan, like months and months later than we should have, and it seems shoehorned in, and it doesn't seem like all the angles of it have been figured out. Like, what the hell are these ghosts that are bothering Batwing? And, you know, even he himself says, come on, can't you think of something less cheesy than this typical poltergeist movie material? I mean, that was kind of telling in a way. So, and then we have our kind of final beat of the story. This is the big spoiler. I always spoil things in these Batman videos. I guess one reason I talk about these Batman videos is there's a conversation going on here in YouTube about Batman in particular, and a lot more people read Batman than any other given comic, so it's something we can talk about in more detail. So I'm spoiling the end of this, which is, we have this thing where Batman examines the data again and says, oh, what a dummy I've been. It's so obvious in the data here that it's the signs of Ra's al Ghul. And then we get this last page just showing us Ra's al Ghul and his evil smile. It's actually pretty well done last page, but I don't think any of us believe it is Ra's al Ghul. And it just, all of this makes Batman look a little stupid. It seems like he can't figure out things that turn out to be obvious. And how come he isn't suspicious that at this point, this might be another dead end, another trick by whoever it really is? I think one of the most interesting things, and head-scratching things at this point, is to figure out who this is. I loved Joshua Hayes' theory that it was Red Hood, although that would really turn upside down the DC universe, and maybe they wouldn't be willing to turn Red Hood back into a crazy man. But I liked that theory. I had my own theory at one point that it could be Talia al Ghul, either her clone, that she wasn't really killed, or she's been brought back to life, or the person who was killed was actually a clone and she is still alive. Perhaps extra crazy and extra wanting revenge on Batman since the death of Damian. Which is undercut by Damian being back in the continuity that apparently happens after Batman Eternal. Or a cabal of numerous enemies of Batman. But that doesn't seem to be it. It feels like there's no clues. There's no foreshadowing or anything. I guess if they foreshadowed it too much, too many of us would figure it out, because there's too many Bat fanatics out there examining these things closely. It's another sort of interesting thing that popped out at me is, does this mean that Mr. Begone knows now that Batman is Bruce Wayne? Does he know who these ghosts are? He can see these ghosts attacking Bruce Wayne. And did anyone else perhaps see? There's police coming on the scene in just a moment. Anyway, that was an interesting little thing. And Batman just sort of beats up Mr. Begone, and that, I don't know. Yeah. It was an okay issue, but again, it just flaunts the flaws of the series. And it's sad that, you know, just because there's so many great comics out there, and the last two issues were so good, that Ray Fox couldn't keep up the level of quality. And it just felt like he was awkwardly stuffing in little things he wanted. Another example would be, he just has Batwing beat up the ghosts, with his nth medal or whatever it is, and then in walks Jim Corrigan to have a convenient conversation with him to hit the beat that now they have something in common because they've both been through a supernatural experience together. Wouldn't it have been so much better to have Corrigan come in while he was still fighting the ghosts and help him out, and have something that happens on stage, something in the acting out of events, solidify and create their bond, rather than just having the bond in a conversation? That's just an example of the kind of rushedness, and I just sitting here in my car just thought of that. I know from my own attempts at writing fiction that you often have to, you have to push a little deeper. You have to try to think of ways to enact things. And in comic books, that's kind of the natural thing. There's images and these characters, in superhero comics, doing these big things. So you can use those big things to create the character stuff. Not just stop and have characters talk and say, okay, now we're bonded because we're having this conversation. Just is, it doesn't work for me. And there are some people who bond over conversation more, and some people who bond over hiking a mountain, right? And it feels like superheroes should be the bonders over hiking a mountain. And that just goes with the visual medium, too. So anyway, now I'm not really looking forward to Batman going and having probably a pointless little adventure with Ra's al Ghul and then finding out it is not Ra's al Ghul. And at this point I want him to be collecting clues at least that will be useful rather than just eliminating suspects. If they wanted to put Ra's al Ghul in this, they should have, and then eliminate him, they should have done it a long time ago. Now maybe there'll be some clever twist where Ra's al Ghul is part of it, but that's not the end of the story. I don't know. I can't even imagine how they're going to wrap this up in 7. Now 7 issues for most things would be a lot, an entire novel, but with all that they've built here. And, I think I've said before, ever since they jumped ahead in all the other Bat books, jumped ahead of the continuity in this Batman Eternal, I've been kind of bitter about it anyway. But there have been good issues. There's been lots of good issues since then, and lots of bad issues since then. But the overall feel of this, and my complaint about it, just keeps getting more solidified. I'm keeping on reading it. I have fun issue by issue. I'm just annoyed at the overall thing of it. So I wouldn't recommend anybody pick it up after the fact. I think, if you're saying, well, why should I keep picking this up? Are you having fun when you pick up the issue each week? I'm almost always having fun. If you're not, even though it's near the end, maybe save yourself $21 and don't waste your money. You can always get the volumes from the library someday. But I think most of us are still getting some enjoyment out of it. There's kind of the enjoyment of complaining about it. Maybe we can talk later about who's to blame, or maybe did I do that in my other video? Anyway, it's kind of goofy, but that's what we're here for, goofiness. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.